I think when you're watching a finale, when you're watching any show generally, episode to episode, but especially for a finale, there should be that buildup of all the hard work, all the stakes, all the plot, everything built up into this moment where you can't leave your seat and your eyes cannot leave the screen. Your mind is fully captivated by what you're watching. Hey people, my name is Jeff, and today we are going to be reacting to The Penguin episode number 8, the season finale, and I'll also be getting into my thoughts on the season as a whole. So, as always, if you haven't watched the entire season now of The Penguin, you should do that now if you want to avoid spoilers. If you don't, okay, but just know that there will be spoilers, and I won't also be going over every single part of the plot. You should be watching the things that I'm reacting to. I think that only makes sense. And I also think that it only makes sense that if you like this video, you should give it a thumbs up, maybe hit that bell, subscribe for more content just like this, and of course, share it around and get in on the comments below so we can all have a discussion about this show, whether we like it, don't like it, or just think it's fine and solid, or whatever, because all opinions are welcome here. But without further ado, let's get into it. The Penguin, the season finale, episode number 8. So this episode starts off with a flashback, this time though from the perspective of Frances, as Rex Calabrese comes to help her mourn the loss of her 2 young boys. But what Rex doesn't know is that Frances actually found the flashlight in Oz's jacket, so she has put 2 and 2 together with the evidence also from the police that they had to pry the door open to get her sons, that Oswald did probably kill her children, saying that he was always needy, he was just a needy little boy that could never be satisfied, and is the devil, which is a pretty big claim to be saying about a child, especially about a world that's so grounded and real. But whatever, and yes, you know what, no, I can't say it's completely unrealistic, I guess, because some parents are truly awful, which Frances really is. So Rex does what he could, and that is to offer to kill him, which is also fucking insane. Now, I'm not saying that the mafia has never or would never kill a child, because they have done that. It's just typically not something that they do without like very good reasoning, and obviously people slip up, but it's generally a thing that they try to definitely avoid doing. And I think in this situation, there is no reason that they would do that, because him being this way doesn't necessarily affect them as a mafia. It doesn't affect their operation, so they wouldn't just kill this kid for a favor for somebody else, because again, he's a 12-year-old boy. During the flashback though, Oswald promises mom to make something of his life and to save her and give her the life that she's always wanted. And also says some really nice words about her, saying that he sees her like nobody else does. And of course, she then reconsiders murdering her child. Mom of the fucking year. And some might say, well, if you know what he's gonna turn into, or you think he's so evil even at the time, what is so wrong about her wanting to kill him? Hear me out here, I just don't think it's ever morally right to kill a child. Not only that, but Rex kind of did give her away an avenue out of this to not murder her child by allowing him to work for him and use what he has in a more productive way and kind of help him grow out of that. But no, Frances decided, nah, let's just kill him. Let's just kill my boy. That's kind of fucking insane. And it's weird because I think they tried to like humanize her in a way, in like a positive way, like trying to make her feel like I should have any sympathy for her, but like I don't. Like, no, she's still a bad fucking mom. Like all the bad things that he does not override the fact that she's a terrible parent. And if she really thought he was so needy and so annoying, well, god damn it, girl, maybe you shouldn't have had kids. Crazy thought, I know. What I really like though in this intro was the performance of Ryder Allen, the kid who plays Oswald, and honestly, no notes, just 10 out of 10, great performance. It's like a perfect impression of Colin Farrell's Penguin, so I loved it. It was great to see him do basically all the same mannerisms. The accent was like literally exactly the same as his, so I thought that was really awesome. Hats off to him. The best part of this whole episode was the scene where Sofia is tormenting Oz and Frances, trying to get him to confess to his mom to killing his brothers. Now, obviously though, I think it should be obvious at least, is that Oswald doesn't actually care about anybody. everybody in his life that he supposedly cares about, he is ultimately just using for his own purely selfish game. His ego and his passion and his drive to be the person that he wants to be is so much greater than anybody else to him. And so he is literally willing to let his mom's finger be cut off because he could never admit to being wrong. He could never admit to being so pathetic in his life, to killing his brothers to get the attention of his mom in that way. He could never be that vulnerable. And so Frances makes sure that she removes her own agony from the situation by saying that she actually did know the whole time, and saying that she actually hates Oswald so much and that she has always hated him, gets up and stabs him in the stomach. And then she suddenly has a stroke, falls down, Oswald breaks out. And Sofia, because she's so vindictive at this point, because her whole goal right now is to make Oswald suffer, doesn't think to kill him even though he's so dangerous. And then she gets away, just barely, as he kills pretty much all the goons. And that's kind of where this episode really tails off. After this, it kind of slows down a lot. The pacing grinds to a pretty big halt, not gonna lie to you. And it's not that all of the things that happen right in the middle are unnecessary per se, but they feel unnecessary in this episode. For example, the gang's turning on Sofia and their main leaders, Oswald working with Haiti. All of that to me should have been set up in the previous episodes because it's a finale. The finale of a show, especially like this, should have a lot of stakes, and it should be high paced, it should be action packed, and that's what I was expecting, and we just didn't get that at all. We got a very slowed down version, like honestly, like truthfully, a pretty poorly paced episode all in all, where good things happen, but realistically, again, like I said, in the wrong places. I think when you're watching a finale, when you're watching any show generally, episode to episode, but especially for a finale, there should be that buildup of all the hard work, all the stakes, all the plot, everything built up into this moment where you can't leave your seat and your eyes cannot leave the screen. Your mind is fully captivated by what you're watching, and I didn't feel that at all for even a second. I felt that I could mostly predict what was going to happen, that I just didn't feel the stakes of this. And I'm gonna talk about more of that later, but in general, I felt that the pacing of this episode was really what kind of killed it for me. Not that it was bad, it was fine, it was even good at points, but it's just poor execution. It's poor execution if we're being blunt about it. And I even think the ending had some good parts. I think Sofia not being killed and actually being sent to Arkham, that was a good thing to do. That made a lot of sense. I think sending her back there was a really good way to end the story with her, and give you some finality instead of allowing her to leave or anything like that, or get away, or killing her. I don't think that would have necessarily been the right thing. I think that was the right choice at the end of it. And I think it was a nice ending to see Penguin accumulating all the power that he always wanted to, becoming the kingpin of crime of Gotham. It was also a bit of a shock to see him kill Victor, although I wasn't totally surprised because I did think at some point he would do that. Or Victor would somehow die by getting a little too close to the sun. But it does feel good in the sense that the character was coming full circle. He had this kind of maturity in a sense, and you know, growing a lot as a character, and he was also still like a good guy, you know, for the most part. He was still kind of a good character, so his death definitely had meaning, and it was sad. It was sad to watch that happen. All in all, I think this episode was pretty good, solid, but I think my favorite episode was the Sofia and Arkham one, personally. And now, we get into my thoughts of the series as a whole. Now, no matter what your feelings are, I want to hear from you. I want this to be an open discussion. I want to hear whether you think the show is great, or you think it's the best show ever, or you think it's the worst show ever, or you just think it's fine. No matter what your feelings are, it's all good. You're allowed to enjoy something. You're allowed to hate something, in my opinion. However, please try to take my opinion for what it actually is and not what it isn't. And my opinion of this show is that it's just fine. And that's not a crazy take. It's not one way or the other. I just think it's fine. I think, like I've said, and you can go check all my reactions, I've been pretty consistent that the show has had good moments, but there's been a lot lacking. And there's also been a lot of problems, specifically with execution. So let's start with the good though. I think the main thing is that the acting in this show was good. Not a lot of complaints there. Overall, I think the performances that the actors put in were good. Everyone tried their best. I think everyone understood the characters to as much depth as they all each individually had. The only really weak performance was Julian Rush. I think he was just such an inconsequential character overall in my mind. So maybe, you know, it wasn't totally Rossi's fault as an actor. I think maybe it's just the writing. He was just kind of a weak and poorly done character. Because I think if you removed him, it really doesn't matter at all. Like, I think you could do so many of the things that he does without him. And I will still maintain that Kristen Milioti was the best. I think Kristen Milioti by far had the most nuanced performance, the deepest performance. I liked hers the most, and you know, I think Colin Farrell's obviously awesome too, and like I've said before, he's one of my favorite actors, so me saying that he's not the best isn't a shot at him at all. I still think he was really, really good. But I would also say that all of y'all should be watching all their other great performances, because they've done a lot of other shows, a lot of other movies where they've done amazing, amazing stuff, and you should watch all of those because they're pretty awesome too. But good acting does not trump bad writing, bad execution, and a poorly constructed plot. In the last episode, I talked a little bit about how Clancy Brown's lines for Sal were not the best, and that's true of a couple of characters in this. I even think the main characters also kind of struggle with that at times too. But this isn't really what I'm talking about. I think I would have to be so picky there that it's just, we're getting into the weeds there. I don't really want to do that. But what I would say is that the plot and the way that it's structured is kind of poor. Mainly, I think the problem that they ran into is the fact that they had a pretty evil guy as the main protagonist. And he took up about 70 to like 80% roughly of the episodes and of the screen time generally. And almost everything kind of came from his perspective. And the problem with that is, in my mind, is he almost had nothing at stake because, like I said, he doesn't care about anything. And not only that, like from the first episode to the last, he loses a lot of his charm. We lose the sympathy pretty quick because, you know, you're expecting, right, to see a person where you can kind of get why they're bad. You kind of are like, okay, you know what? That's really fucked up, but like, hey, you know what, he's not all bad or whatever. They have to have some redeeming qualities. And the Penguin doesn't have redeeming qualities intentionally because he's supposed to be really fucking awful. But that creates a problem because if he's not constantly doing these evil, terrible things, but he's on screen also for like most of the time, you lose kind of the fear of him in a sense. And because you know so much about him, these moments where he does do awful things like burning 2 people alive become so much less like crazy, right? Because we just kind of know too much about him. And not only that, but drawing out the Penguin's backstory over 8 episodes was a mistake. They probably should have sprinkled his backstory in about him killing his brothers and Francis knowing and trying to get him killed and stuff earlier on, because that should have sat with us for a lot longer. That should have just been stewing for most of the episodes. I think actually having that information would have benefited us a lot more, especially knowing that Frances knew her son did something so awful. Because again, both of them are not likable. Both of them are really bad people. So in my opinion, at least, I wasn't rooting for them at all to do anything. And also with that, you have to have, in my opinion, a stronger supporting cast, and they really didn't have that. And the reason why they didn't have that is because they just didn't have any episodes where we saw things in almost any scene. In fact, no, actually we didn't really see, we saw maybe one scene where we had the perspective of someone else other than Sofia, Victor, or Oswald. The only one was where Frances had her flashback with Rex and her son. Other than that, it's always those 3. And so because of that, we only really get to know them and we only really are invested in them and care about them. But again, hard to care about Oswald because he's so fucking bad. And we also just kind of know the ending. We know pretty much what's going to happen to basically all of them for the most part. So there's nothing like keeping you tense at all because we can see this stuff coming a mile away. And even with Sofia, she doesn't even have like moral dilemmas, right? Because Sofia is constantly trying to get revenge while also keeping some kind of code. She's trying to not be as bad as her father. So her killing her family feels justified because it was for vengeance. They really did do her dirty. It made sense why she did that. Now, it was obviously bad that she orphaned a child. That was not good. And then kind of, mostly threatened her. That was not great. That was bad. But, for the most part, she doesn't really have any moral dilemmas. Everything she does makes sense. But it's like, overall, I feel like maybe we could have done a little bit more with that to try to challenge her a little bit to stay on that good side. But instead, she shifted so hard for revenge that we didn't really get any of those moments in there. And obviously, Oswald hasn't had a moral dilemma in his life, so we were never going to see that. But how do you make it different? How do you change things to make others feel more important? Make the general plot and all the moments and the scenes feel more impactful. Make you as an audience member feel tense and wondering exactly what's going to happen, especially because a lot of us have just seen a lot of TV and a lot of movies. Plots become very predictable when that happens for you. The execution of the plot is one of the greatest issues. I think, like I said, in the season finale, they had too much there at the end. And I think generally, editing-wise, or just as far as like the general construction of this plot, they could have moved a lot of things around, trimmed the fat, and moved a ton of things around and added more to the other characters. Specifically giving other characters scenes from their perspective so we could start to humanize them and understand them and at least give some kind of a fuck about them. Because personally, I didn't give a fuck about basically anybody in the show outside of like Victor. Eve is one of the best examples of this. I said in one of my very first reactions that I felt that she was going to be more important in this show, and she just wasn't. And I knew that there would come a point where most likely Sofia would at some point interrogate her or threaten her or something like that, and that would be an interesting moment. But we didn't get that. We didn't get that at all. We didn't get basically any more information on Eve because we had no scenes with her outside of Oswald. So when Sofia comes to threaten her, we know that A, Oz doesn't care about her, and well, that's pretty much it, right? Because we don't see her in anything else. We don't know why we should care about her. That is something that has happened throughout almost all good TV shows. If you think of any of them, I think the best example for me is The Wire, where there are so many moving parts, so many characters. They still find ways to make sure you know why all these characters matter, why they're all human, flaws and all, and you understand them and you want things to be good for them or whatever. You want them to succeed, you don't want them to die, and them dying potentially has a consequence, especially because the main character, like Oswald, has plot armor. You know nothing's going to happen to him. And so Eve is a great example where she doesn't feel human. In fact, she feels dehumanized so much in this plot, if anything at all, and she has no real agency, so her getting caught in the crossfire between Oswald and Sofia feels like nothing. It feels like it doesn't matter. Another example that's a little bit different is Salvatore Maroni. Salvatore Maroni is supposed to be this big bad that we're all scared of, and it's pretty clear through the plot, through the dialogue, through everything that they're supposed to fear him, and I don't fear him at all. I also don't feel like I understand him. I don't feel like, outside of the obvious, oh yeah, he killed my wife and kids, so I'm gonna go after him. Okay, sure. But it's like, that's kind of weak. I think we should all be able to admit that that is kind of like weak character development. We'd really there's just not enough there to really care about Salvatore Maroni or fear him in any way, shape, or form. And so his character just fell so flat for me. I was so excited to see him, and again, another one where it just doesn't feel like anything was going on there. So no scenes with the other characters outside of the main three really makes everything else just feel so inconsequential. And even scenes that they're in feel inconsequential because their world really wasn't built up that well. And if you don't believe me, okay, I'll give you an example where they actually did that, because they literally did it in this episode, where we saw Victor being built up throughout the plot, throughout the story. He even got his own full episode, which you didn't necessarily need to do for all the others, but you did get it with him. And you saw a character mature. You saw this sweet guy, who's, got some flaws, obviously, but for the most part, he's a sweet kid. He's just trying to do the best he can in this world, trying to figure his life out. And again, he is a kid. He's a young guy, so you have a lot more sympathy for him. He's building himself up as a person. And, he loves Oz. He cares about Oz. He built up Oz, honestly. He saved him. He helped him. He did all these things. He had so many meaningful moments. And again, you don't have to have as many meaningful moments as Victor. But the fact is that we did get those. And you're not going to tell me that his death didn't matter. It did. You felt bad for him at the bare minimum. Even if you thought he was going down a bad path, you felt that his death had consequence. You didn't want to see him die. He was an important character to the story, and now he's gone. And there were stakes there, and those stakes have now been settled. But for everything else, there's no real stakes. And some people will say, oh, well, they didn't have enough time. Honestly, don't give me that, because this show had run on very inconsistent times. We had some 1 hour episodes, some hour and 10-minute episodes. We had like 45-minute episodes, 50-minute episodes. There was no consistent amount of time, and so they could have easily fit this stuff in. Good directors, good editors, good showrunners, good writers can fit this in. There is no excuse for them, and I rest my case. Last thing I want to say on this is I do feel that people are saying this is the best comic IRL adaptation. To be fair, people do say that. I just feel like that's a lot of recency bias. And the reason I say that is because it just happens all the time. It's really hard for me to not have that bias towards that opinion, because it just happens so consistently, and it honestly happens with the same people. People are not allowed to talk bad about these shows. And I'm not saying that they have to have the same opinions as me, not at all. Like, please have your own opinions. Enjoy the show if you enjoy it. But I think the reason why I also feel that we have some serious recency bias is because, do y'all not remember Daredevil? Like, have these people that are saying this, have you guys not watched Daredevil? Daredevil is an awesome show. Daredevil's, I think, also one of the most unanimously loved comic book shows, comic book adaptations. And to say that the Penguin was better, I think is, you're forgetting about some. And there was even some MCU shows that, and the MCU shows have gotten a lot of criticism, and I have my own personally with them, but I do think a lot of them were at least just as good. At least the ones in the beginning were probably just as good as this show overall. I also have to say that I think people have been sleeping for way too long on shows like Legion or the Doom Patrol. And I understand a lot of people won't watch those shows ever because they're not that popular. I get it. But I would say my recommendation is give those shows a try. Give them a shot. The Legion is a little bit weird, and so is Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol is actually pretty weird. So I don't think that it's for everybody, and that's fine. You can have your opinions on that. That's totally cool. I think those shows are really, really well done. Those are two of my favorites. So go ahead, watch those two. If you like The Penguin and you really, really do like comic book adaptations, go watch those, because those, in my opinion, are near perfect. Having said all that, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. Please make sure to share this video around, like it if you like it. Drop a comment below, let me know your thoughts. Honestly, no judgment here. It's an open discussion. And make sure to subscribe for more content just like this.